Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Criterion Learning Series. Thank you for joining us today. We do have quite a few people joining, and we're going to get started here. So today we're going to be talking about general ledger account mapping overview, which is obviously a payroll topic. So we're going to talk about that today. If you do have any questions along the way, we do have a chat and a Q&A where you can go ahead and post your questions there. We do have a couple people in there monitoring that who will be able to answer your questions, or we'll try to answer your questions. And if we cannot answer your questions during today's session, then we will get back to you as soon as we can. So let's go ahead and get started here. As you see, I switch over to my browser. And all of what we're going to be doing today is going to be in the back end, the administrative side of it. There's really nothing at all to see here on the self-service, but of course, this is just where we start when we go into the system here. So I'm going to immediately just switch over to my configuration back here. And of course, where we're going to be starting is in your settings. Now, depending on where you are in the system, of course, the settings in the administration is always up here, and it will remember what you did last. So I did an export of this because we're going to talk about that here. But this is where we're going to go to our settings. Now, of course, GL account and GL account map, these are the two things we're going to be talking about. However, they are tied to incomes, deductions, taxes, etc. So those need to exist before we can map things to different codes. Now, of course, if you're adding a new deduction or new income code, you'll want to add that first. You can add the account number into the system for a deduction or income or tax that doesn't exist. You just can't do anything as far as the mapping of those to the codes because the code has to exist first. So you would come into your deductions, your incomes, et cetera, and you would add in the codes or code that you need. And then you're going to go to here. Now, like I mentioned, you could do the accounts first. When you're going through an implementation, typically we would set up the incomes, deductions, and taxes, and then we would talk about the GL accounts and setting that stuff up. So here you can see some example GL accounts. Of course, yours are probably more sophisticated than what I have here. You may have, more than just 4 numbers here. You might have, a sub account or section or dimension or whatever you may refer to it as on here. But this is just an example of this. And if you want to see how to add one here, very simple to add manually. Click the add button, type in the account number that you want. Let's just say 2001 is the account number, and I'm going to say medical deduction. So very easy to manually add one. You may not want to add them all manually though, especially if you have dozens or hundreds of account numbers, you may want to import those. So I'll definitely talk about importing these when we get around to that portion a little bit later in this discussion here. But adding those there, and of course, editing an existing one, I can click on an existing one and I can change the account number and or the account name if I need to. One thing you'll see here is the delete button. You cannot delete a GL account that's in use in the map or has been used in the general ledger. So you won't be able to, let's say this is no longer the account number you're using for employer deductions. I can't just simply delete this. You can stop using it if you need to, or remap deductions to a new code. But once it's been used, I can't delete it there. So there are options to get rid of it. You could go through each payroll batch and delete all the general ledger transactions and then come in and delete the mapping and then delete the code if you needed to clear something out. But let's say you're changing ERPs and you're changing your GL structure. You can't just simply, I need to delete this and add a new one that's now 30,000 or something like that. All right, so that's adding the codes there. Now these are added per employer. So I have a couple of employers here. So if I needed something for this graduate school Inc., I would need to add the codes over here as well. They may be exactly the same. They may be different. That's obviously up to you on how you have that configured. But I can't use these codes in the account mapping for the other company. They are set up by employer. All right, so once I have those here, let me just go now to the GL account mapping. So there's a few different things you'll see on here, as I was just mentioning, is employer. So you'll want to make sure that that matches up to the accounts that you just set up. you know, might accidentally be in the wrong employer and then not see an account and say, what the heck's going on? That's just because you're in the wrong employer. It's not the system is broken or something. All right, so when I'm looking at adding a new account or new account mapping, I should say, in here, I have this button to add. All right, so we'll talk about these different buttons here, but first one here you'll see is add. And here you get the different types. So this is where you're going to basically tell it, what am I going to be linking this over to? So deduction, employee and employer side. So if you have an employer match on a deduction or just an employer contribution, maybe there's no employee match at employee contribution at all, you would have to set it up for one or both sides. An income, pretty straightforward there. Income the employee might have. Net pay, rounding, which we'll talk about there. Statistical journals, that's for intact. Suspense account, and then you'll see taxes down here, employee and employer. So just like deductions, you'll have both sides, and then time off. All right, so when we select one of these, it's going to show a drop-down menu that corresponds with whatever I selected. So, you know, income is going to change it to income there, and tax is going to change it to tax. So you can see how that works right there. So once I select, let's say, employee deduction here, then I would choose the deduction that I'm going to be mapping it to. So as I just mentioned in the beginning, the deduction has to exist. So if I'm looking for, I don't know, a code that's not here, ABC is the deduction code, I'm looking for that, and I don't see it, make sure you set it up first. But then you go ahead and select the deduction that you're going to do. And this is a one, you do it for each deduction. I can't select more than one right here. This is going to be, you know, for basic medical only. If this, let's say, cafe or child support or whatever also goes to the same one, I'd have to set it up for that one too. All right, and then because it's an employee deduction, we have the credit amount that goes right here. So just like that. All right, so very simple on the top here. Now at the bottom is where you can say, all right, if the location, the project, etc., matches up, this is the account to use. So if you did an account number, let's just say I had 2000 was kind of the main account, and then I had sub accounts 100, 200, 300, 400 for different departments or something along those lines. I might set up an account number 2000-100, and that is the accounting department. So I would select accounting right here. I can obviously get more granular here. You'll see location, department, cost center, project, sub-project, task, subtask. Allows you to get very granular here if you needed to tie to something very specific there. Now, there are some ERPs that we work with where there are dimensions, and the GL export will pull in information so you don't have to set it up in the map. What I would say is, you know, if you're not sure about that, maybe you come in here and you don't see your setup exactly how you think it should be, please reach out to support or talk to your implementation provider to make sure that, you know, this is configured correctly, because many times we do have it set up in the GL mapping to the ERP where it will just automatically pull in, let's say, the project or something like that. So you may not see every single thing in here just because that's how the app works to the various ERP you're using. All right, now, when I'm doing this, of course, what this means is that if there is a deduction for basic medical and somebody's time or they are in this department, it's going to go to this 2000 account. If somebody's has this deduction, but they're not in accounting, it's not going to use this. It's just going to either, if I don't have something at all, it's going to go into like a suspense account that we can configure. Or, you know, it's going to not do anything at all because we don't know what to do. So there's certain things that could happen with the system. So if you're ever seeing that, like I'm not seeing it allocated right, what's all this stuff in the suspense account or something, you need to make sure that you have this configured in here. Again, reaching out support is probably the best way to do it, but experience-wise of me setting these up, I know that sometimes you might miss a department or you add a new department and suddenly you have a bunch of stuff going to suspense. Well, it's probably that deduction for those employees in that new department. So look at that. The same thing could happen, obviously, if you had a deduction that wasn't mapped. It doesn't know what to do with it when payroll is done, and it will just go to a suspense account. Also, what might happen, and I've seen this, is that there might be a big rounding that could happen because it doesn't know where to go. If you do break it down even further, let's say I do an account, a department and a cost center or something like that, again, it's going to look to see what matches up. So if I did customer service here, basic medical accounting customer service, it's going to be very specific for that. And anything that's not in customer service or it's in one of these other two, it's not going to say, well, they're in accounting, so go to this one. It has to match exactly what's on this screen. So I just want to stress that and make sure you understand that there. All right, so once I've set this up, I obviously have the save button to save it. Cancel will close this and not save this. This button up here is just going to go to the next one. So or the previous one in the list there. Not really applicable when you're adding a new one, but it would have gone to this rounding one as an example. You'll see here, it goes to my rounding. All right. So that's how you set up an employee deduction. I can talk about the other ones too here, just very quickly. Employer, of course, you're going to have a credit and a debit because there's the both sides of that right there. So you can, again, choose that, let's say 401k and there's a match on it. What is the credit and debit accounts there? You can go ahead and configure that. And again, the same granularity down at the bottom. Incomes are very straightforward because when you do income, of course, you're selecting the code, but you'll see it's just debit account that's required. Right, so select bonus or whatever and put that again. It can get granular down there. Going into, let's look at the stuff that's on the payroll, the taxes. Again, taxes, we got the credit amount. We do the employer, we got the debit and credit amounts. So we have those on there. Now this one, you'll see it says all tax. So this one, you can have it go to every tax, or you might go through and select the different tax codes. Now, when I'm doing this, you'll notice right here, show only taxes in employer's payroll. Right now, there's 10,794 results, and you probably wouldn't want to go through every page here because there's many, many pages. But if you do this, it's going to look and see what do I have configured and show only the codes that are configured. I don't know if I have any configured in my setup here, so this might come up with nothing. But that's what that would be for. It's going to look and see what do I have configured. If I have, let's say, Illinois configured, it should show just the Illinois codes. And again, I don't remember which codes I have. So that's what that's for there. Cancel here. Net pay, probably your bank account. In fact, I'll just click on it here. So what is your bank account there? And again, you could break it down. The rounding, so what that would do is it would help to catch if you don't have something set up. So what you may want to do in a rounding situation here is set up credit and or debit accounts to catch where there is not something configured. So let's say you add a new deduction code and you forgot to add the setup here in the GL mapping. The rounding is going to catch either the credit and or debits to that deduction that should be going somewhere but have nowhere to go. So you'll see here 7,000 would be my rounding credit, 7,001 being my rounding debit. There are reports I could run then that could then show me, oh, okay, what is going to 7,000? Oh, I see, it's this new deduction I added and I forgot to set it up. So it's always a good idea to set up a rounding account to catch those situations where you may add a new code or let's say a new department and something isn't configured right. It would at least catch it and go somewhere rather than what can happen is if you don't have a rounding is it might spread it around to all the other different deductions because the system doesn't know what to do with those credits and or debits if there's no account mapped to it at all for a particular code or more than one code. So it's always a good idea to have this because then it will go somewhere and you can identify it on a report. All right, suspense account. So if you need that, again, you'll see here, just like rounding, we have suspense right there. And then statistical journal, that would be used specifically for Intact. You can do that for different incomes and you can have it go to a certain credit account and we can send the statistical journal across for Intact there. So that's what that's for. If you don't have Intact, it won't really do anything for you. So no reason to set that up if you don't have Intact. And then down here is time off. That's for the accruals of vacation or sick leave or whatever your time off are. You can have those amounts hit a particular account if you like. So you can choose the plan and then whatever the dollars are that were accrued, you can hit a particular account there. All right, now you can imagine adding these manually may take a while, and it's probably easy to make a mistake because you're adding this all manually here. So we do have this button up here to validate. What this is going to do is make sure that there are no codes that are somehow mapped to this to like different deductions. What I mean by that, or not deductions, but different accounts. So let's say I had basic medical and that same exact configuration going to two different credit accounts. That validation is going to tell me about that. So if I had this configuration going to 2000, and then later on I set it up and it was going to 3000, maybe I accidentally chose employee instead of employer and I had to go into 3000, it would throw that as a message in the validation. And it would tell me that basic medical plan was mapped to two different credit accounts. Now it has to match exactly. So if I had this set up for accounting customer service and then maybe a different account but going to accounting field maintenance, that's not a match and it's not going to throw out a problem there. So just be aware of that. If there, as long as there's something unique, that is not going to be invalid. And then if you want to see it in a spreadsheet, this is very useful here. You can export it out to a spreadsheet here. And let me show you what that would look like here just very quickly. I'm going to switch around to show you what that export looks like. There you go. So you can see first off, we have all these tabs down at the bottom. The first one being the GL incomes. So I can see the various accounts used for different income codes, and I would need to scroll over. You'll see here, here's all is going to miscellaneous, hourly is going to 1000, salary is going to 1001. So it allows you to check out your setup maybe in a spreadsheet. Maybe you're more comfortable in a spreadsheet versus looking at it on screen. And then each other type here, general ledger account map. So this is telling me about the different account numbers and so forth for deductions, and then taxes, time off, and you'll see them all right here down at the bottom. All right, so that's what you could use this for, to do a little analysis and verifying that stuff's set up correctly, looking at it in Excel. So if you're comfortable with Excel, that might be a good option for you there. Another thing to look at on here that makes it very useful, and I use this from time to time when I'm helping people, is you can click on these columns to sort and group. So let's say you're setting up a new deduction, you want to make sure you have everything done. You may want to group it by the type, and you'll notice now it has the different types here. And then you can collapse the groups to just show, let's say, deductions. All right, so I'm looking just at my employee deductions, and then maybe I want to sort it by one of these things here. Now you'll see location and task, but I can also click on here and choose columns and show department and cost center. So maybe you use department and cost center, you don't use location and task, you can uncheck those, and then I could check the mapping. Okay, good, I got it set up for accounting. Oops, I'm missing something, and you maybe add it and go forward like that. So just be aware you can customize this view here and make some changes in there. All right, so this is all the manual entering of this. So let's look at how we can do this through an export or import situation. So to generate the templates that you would use for this import, now it's very similar actually to this export right here, but it's not exactly the same, is under the data import. So you can kind of use these together to see what is set up versus what needs to be set up. But here under the module payroll GL 5D is the template there. You can download a template to use for your general ledger here. So let me show you what this would look like here. I'm going to switch it around. I've already downloaded this. And if I go to my template, it's going to look something like this. So again, just like that export, I have all these different sheets down here at the bottom, different sheets and spreadsheets down here. Now, first off is the lookup values. This is going to show you the different things going to be used on these different sheets here. So you'll see employers, incomes, etc. are all going to be here. And that's going to help when I go to set things up. When I click on incomes, for an example, it's going to use these income codes that are already there. All right, GL account list, this is where you would set up your account numbers. So as I showed you, I can manually add, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever my account numbers are into the system there, manually doing that. But you can imagine if you're doing this for hundreds of account numbers, it might get a little tedious to do one by one. So maybe you can export something out of your ERP, copy and paste it into here, and then you can add it into our setup there. So the important thing, of course, is the employer, and then the account number, whatever it is, and account description. Okay, so simple enough to set that up. You'll see that all three of these fields are required. Anything that's in this yellow color is required. So you have to set that up. And then each of these is going to be very similar when I'm doing the setup of these. So I'll just show you the income, and I'll show you the deduction, and then we can move back to the system there. But here, you'll see the setup, let's say, for an income code. So again, you would choose the employer, let's say AFC Richmond, and then the income code that I want to set up, whatever it is, let's say grill. I don't even know what that is, but grill is the code there. Now, these are not required, but remember those drop downs that we had in the setup. So they're right here. Right, so you might want to choose a certain department or something like that, and say accounting and customer service. All right, and then you'll see debit and credit account right here. So you can choose the appropriate account for this income. All right, so whatever it is. Now you'll notice that it's using the description from over here. So if I needed to see the number, I would have to put it in the description. So just be aware that if you're looking for, 1001 is my account number, you're seeing the description over here. So you may want to put like 1001 in the description, something like this. All right, and then when I come back over here, let's say 1001. All right, of course, GL deduction mapping is very similar. The only difference is the type. You choose employee versus employer income. That doesn't apply. So that's there. Same thing in taxes. We have the tax, and then there's the type for this one here. Well, this one you have the different taxes. You've got like, Social Security, employee and employer, time off, net pay. So the other ones are all here that you can set up the other types. All right, again, please reach out to support or implementation partner. They'll help you out with that. All right, and let me go back into the system here. So once I have that configured, you'll see on this screen right here where it says, action. I would take that file once I saved it and drag and drop it onto here, or hit browse and find it, and then hit import there. Now, what I always recommend is do this in the sandbox, because if you make a mistake and it's in the sandbox, it doesn't hurt really to delete everything and refresh it, and then you can try importing it again. But I always recommend doing it there. Once you're verified everything looks good, then you're good to go there. I don't have a sandbox link to this training one, but you would have sandbox right here where you can refresh your sandbox and get the latest version. You can only do that once every 24 hours. So just be aware of that if you're doing this and you make a mistake, you have to wait 24 hours, or you can probably reach out to support and we may be able to get it done faster. But just be aware of that. You can only refresh once every 24 hours. So yeah. The other thing with the import, this may have been asked in the questions, I didn't catch them all, is that you'll notice that it didn't export out the existing accounts. So if I'm adding a existing GL to a new deduction code, let's say that 1000 account, I needed to add it to new deduction code, there could be some issues with importing it where you would get a duplicate account number 1000. I still think it's easier to import than to do it manually, especially if you've got a lot of accounts. But just be aware of that, and you might need to work with support to figure out the best way that would work for your situation. Maybe the import doesn't make sense. Maybe we can work with our DBA to help you out there. So just be aware of that. Now, where does this all go? Of course, in payroll processing, if you've run payroll before, or even if you haven't, in here under pay processing general ledger, you'll see where I can generate the batches. I've already done, well, I haven't done it for all of them, but the ones with the little trash cans have been done. The one that just says download or transmit, I have not created the batch for that. So when I hit this, it's now going to go out and look at that GL account map and generate my general ledger transaction based off of whatever the configuration is that I've got out there. So I can see the account number and the credits and debits and everything like that. Of course, I could download this to a spreadsheet. If you have the transmit option, maybe you're transmitting to Intact, Acumatica, Dynamics, but we have so many different ones, but any of our ERPs where we export, you'll have a button over here that says transmit, and that'll transmit over. Otherwise, this will generate a CSV that you could use to upload. into your ones. And of course, the format for this is driven by the settings in the system. So it could be different for everybody. But here you see that now, if I looked at it and said, whoa, whoops, this shouldn't be 3,000, this should be something else. What you could do is you could delete the batch that it created, and then you can go fix it and you can regenerate the batch by clicking download again. So I can change 3,000 to 3,001 or something, delete it, download it again, and it is correct. All right, just a few more minutes. I want to talk about these two reports right here, General Ledger Account Employee Detail and GL Summary. So looking at GL Summary here, you'll see here where I can choose the employer, the pay period that I'm going to run it for, and here I can do it for a certain batch if I want to. Do I want to show employer taxes and so forth, so I can run it for certain things, maybe one account number. This could be very useful. Let's say you have stuff going to a rounding account and you're trying to figure that out. You might want to run this just for the rounding account. And look at this. Now this is going to go ahead and run the report here. And you can see, here it is. Now, this does, of course, summarize it by account number. And mine are, again, very generic and simple. So I just have those 6 lines. But if you had sub accounts and all these other different segments, you may have, you know, a lot more than 6. You might have 6 pages or something like that, just really broken down. All right, the account detail one here, the account employee detail, this one is very useful if you're ever having a situation where a code doesn't seem to be set up right or something like that. This one allows you to see all of the detail that's going into a particular general ledger. So again, you might want to do it for a certain one here. This is very useful when you have like a rounding situation, because this will show the code, of course, the details, all the individual transactions, the employees and stuff that go into it. So you can look and see what the situation is. Oh, whoops, I forgot to set up this cost center and there was 3 employees over there. That's where the problem is. And then of course you can go fix that. So I usually check off all 3 boxes here. I'm going to run it as a PDF, but it works great also as Excel, and really helps to find any issues with this. Of course, it helps to find the detail of this. If there's not any issues, if you just want to see what your GL transactions are going to be, you can look at it this way. The other report summarized it, but this shows all the detail. So if something was going to the wrong account, you'll see it has the actual account number, what the code was that was used, all the details as far as like work location and so forth, the debits and credits. So you can really get into that level of detail. And as you can see, it's nicely laid out. So if I do export this out to Excel, it's different rows. So I can easily do filters and so forth on that to get that in there. All right, so that is our overview. Obviously, there's a lot that can go into a general ledger configuration, just because that it can be very complicated, but just want to give a high level overview. Of course, if you do have any questions about GL, please feel free to reach out to support. You can hit the help menu button in the system there, and it will show you the email address and phone number to call. You can do a ticket right through there if you like to. You'll see here at the bottom of this slide, I also have the phone number and email address, and hopefully we're able to answer your questions in the Q&A about this. So let's talk about our upcoming schedule here. We're going to continue on payroll one more time, talking about deductions. In a couple of weeks on the 28th, we'll talk about deductions overview. Then we're going to switch to some talent engagement things. So learning management on April 11th. So if you're interested in learning management and how that all works in the system, then we'll go talk about performance management. So performance reviews and some of the settings over there. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about recruiting and talking about open positions in recruiting. So 3 different things on talent. We haven't really spent a huge amount of time over in talent engagement. So we're going to spend some time over there in April and May. So again, thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to call us with any questions you have on support, our number there, and email us. And otherwise, we will see you again in a couple of weeks.